Marnie, Iowa, and the Royal Enfield tour truck with demo bikes is here, and we're going to be riding some bikes today. I went for a ride on the Himalayan 450, and I'm probably going to put some thoughts in the ride video because it's probably really windy, so I might really tone down the sound and put some music in there, but I might do some over narration to get some afterthoughts. But my initial first impression is, if you saw the video where I was talking about coming out to Baxter's, I was a little concerned about the seat height because I had sat on it in my local dealer in Tucson, and I was thinking, man, this bike feels a little tall, a little top heavy. Man, I couldn't tell you how more wrong I was. It was so easy to ride, even at 5.5 with a 30-inch inseam. It was a dream, honestly. Now, I can't flat foot. I'm kind of tippy-toeing if I'm going to put both feet down. 1 foot planted is cake. Had no problem switching feet. It's very well balanced, and it is probably the lightest steering and feeling Royal Enfield I have felt to date. It is even more than my Interceptor and my Classic 350. It was freaking awesome. But like I said, I'm going to put some notes, or I'm going to narrate some notes in the ride video, and that will be coming up right after this. Alright, so here I am on the brand new 2025 Royal Enfield Himalayan 450. I'm of course riding this one in Marnie, Iowa at Baxter Cycles. Always a great place to try something new. My GoPro angle ended up mostly looking at the bike instead of the scenery, so while you're riding along with me, basically seeing the bike only, I'll talk through overall how it actually felt to ride this bike. Now, as I mentioned before, when I had sat on the Himalayan 450 in a showroom floor here in Tucson, I felt like it was too tall for me. It felt like it was a little bit more top heavy, and I think a lot of that had to do with their floor. They have one of those really slick sealed concrete floors. Perhaps I wasn't wearing the best footwear that day. I don't really know, but when I sat on this bike, it was great. Swinging over a leg on this Himalayan with no luggage was no problem at all. The seat height didn't intimidate me, and then once I had it upright, the bike felt very balanced. For such a tall bike, you know, kind of in the same, I think I can't remember the exact weight, but they're roughly about the same as my Interceptor. And so it felt very much like riding my Interceptor with I guess with the caveat that it felt a little taller overall, but it was no problem to balance it. And compared to my Classic 350, you know, like I sit taller on my Classic 350 because I've got that sprung seat. And like, honestly, it sort of felt like that, but it had a different balance to it. And you notice this when you got going at some higher speeds through these sweeps that come up on this ride. Now, this ride was obviously a group ride. We weren't going on any dirt. The pavement was great. We basically just drove from one town to another and turned back. And so there wasn't anything, you know, really out there as far as things to test the suspension or the handling on terribly. But I will have to say that going through the sweeps felt great. Now, I will have to say that even though I had no problems with this test ride bike, which basically was, stripped down OEM, right out of the box basically bike, but well broke in. Later that day, we were all going to run to lunch, and there was somebody there who's going to loan me their Himalayan 450 to go to lunch on, because I flew out there and I did not have a bike of my own out there. I was often riding some other people's bikes. So to go to lunch, to borrow this 450, I threw on my gear, and this particular Himalayan 450 had a top box and side boxes, and it had also like one of those little thin cooling pads. It's kind of like has like a mesh exterior to it. Now it was very thin, and the bike was in the lower position, but it added just a tiny bit of height to the bike, and all I had to really get leverage on to get it up off the side stand was basically my left big toe. And with the extra weight on the back, it didn't feel like I could, honestly, I ended up not taking the bike because I didn't feel like I could get it safely, like switch feet, things like that, with the added weight. So I ended up skipping that. I never really got it off the side stand with just my left big toe. Although I do know, like, if I had more time, I probably could have figured it out as far as like the way I turned the wheel. I could have turned the wheel to get a little more leverage, things like that. But it definitely made me think, there was such a contrast that drove home, like how much accessories can change the real world practicality of a bike. So thinking maybe a Himalayan 450 is not necessarily, in my cards for like a travel bike. In any case, let's go on to the engine and transmission. It had hands down the best transmission I have felt on a Royal Enfield, I think. It was just very, like there was no thought to it. It just went like between gears. It was great, going down through the gears. It was more seamless than like my Classic and my Interceptor. It was just a very different transmission. I would say that the transmissions in like my Interceptor and the Classic 350 have a lot more character. It takes a tiny bit more effort to go through the gears. This was just, on the Himalayan 450, it was just seamless and cake. The clutch is really light. It feels very smooth and modern. It pulls off from the bottom end very easily and spins up very quickly. The engine is phenomenal on that bike. I have fallen in love with the 450. They call it the Sherpa engine, and the throttle response was very clean, immediate, and it was just honestly a joy to ride. I was honestly surprised how much, like through the sweepies, going close to interstate speeds, how stable the bike felt, but also how nimble it felt at the same time. It didn't feel twitchy, and it didn't feel sluggish. Now, I would love to feel what a naked one would feel like on dirt to me, to see if what the standard tires felt like on dirt, but I would have to be a naked bike, or at least have me get some more saddle time in to get used to a Himalayan. You can tell it's built to handle rough roads, but it won't beat you up on pavement either. These things do incredible distances, and it felt very planted at speed. I mean, it was very lean friendly. Now, as far as the brakes went, I honestly almost couldn't even tell you about the brakes, because it was like I didn't have to think about them. Now, granted, this was a pretty tame test ride, but I never felt like I was underbraked or overbraked. You know, I never felt that they were snatchy or anything like that. They just absolutely worked. I didn't really get a chance to test them as like see how fast I could stop, things like that. So the brakes were very good for what we did. The exhaust note was very tame with the, you know, this bike having the catalytic converters in and the OEM muffler. It was very nice, honestly, to ride this bike this way. I think if I was out in the woods, I wouldn't necessarily want a real loud aftermarket exhaust on one of these. So I thought it was perfectly apropos for what the bike was, or is rather. As far as vibrations go, with it being a single cylinder engine, I didn't really notice any. Now, granted, you know, I have to contrast with having both a Honda Grom and my classic 350, but it definitely, I would say it even felt smoother than either of them. In order of vibration, I'd say my Grom is the most vibey. My classic 350 doesn't really feel vibey to me at all, but it has a little bit. And I think the Himalayan 450 was probably better than my classic 350. So overall, I was really impressed with the bike. It's approachable, well balanced, clearly designed for riders who want to go the distance in mixed terrain, highway, off-road. Coming from my classic 350 and my Interceptor 650, this felt like the natural progression for me to go into an adventure touring cousin, like in the same family. It did make me want to take it down a gravel road and just keep going, but I think I would like to get a little more saddle time on one to make sure that it isn't just a little too tall for me. I think I have like a 29-inch inseam, and also, like, I honestly need to learn how to ride an adventure bike. This was my very first time on an adventure bike. So I know that there are skills that I can acquire to help me ride this bike effectively. I know they're out there. Let's see. So let's go back to the paddock. Got done with riding the Shotgun 650 and it was a blast. I had a really good time on it. It was very much like, it felt like a mixture between my classic 350 and my Interceptor, interestingly enough. Great power. I don't know if I'm imagining this, but it actually, I think, felt a little torquier than my Interceptor. I'm pretty sure they have a different tune on the Shotgun, and it maybe felt a little torquier. Even though I have the aftermarket exhaust and the DNA air filter, I think mine revs up quicker, but this was nice. It was very nice in the sweeps that you'll see coming up in this video. And I will provide some thoughts that I'm gonna narrate over the ride video. I hope there's a lot of it there, because I did have a bug fly up and hit my camera I think about halfway through the ride, so we'll see how much footage there is of that. And anyway, hope you enjoy. All right, here I am on the new 2025 Royal Enfield Shotgun 650. See the Speedo there on the left, and it does have a little LCD portion there in the middle, and it did have the Tripper nav thing over there on the right. And you notice It has this cool kind of fly screen that's shaped for the two of them, custom to the two of them. And the Shotgun 650 is Royal Enfield's factory custom cruiser, essentially. It's long, it's low, and it's designed to stand out. Well, on this spin, I noticed a few things that are different about it from my classic 350 and my Interceptor. Throwing a leg over, first thing I noticed was it honestly has a pretty low seat height. It's definitely taller than your average American cruiser, I would say, with the exception of like the I would say the Sportster, the Harley Davidson Sportster. It is definitely kind of like more similar to that, probably, than any other of the American cruisers. And I really enjoyed the heck out of this bike. Like I said in kind of that little preview after I got done riding it, it felt very much like, since I have low handlebars on my classic 350 and I have the Clubman bars on my Interceptor 650, this kind of like this low, it's not a flat bar, it's not a drag bar, but it's kind of like a super bike bar that was on the Shotgun 650, felt a little bit more relaxed than my other bikes, but definitely sporty. So I would kind of put this more into like a factory custom sport cruiser, with the tried and true 650 twin that Royal Enfield is known for. The position was, aggressive might be too strong of a word. It was definitely, with these handlebars, it did put you into a little bit more of a forward position than, say, maybe the stock Interceptor or the stock classic 350 handlebars. But it was nothing backbreaking or anything like that. It definitely put me ergonomically into a very nice shape for the ride. And its position really is very nice for controlling the bike. It does feel a little bit different than those other two in that, let's contrast it with the Himalayan 450 that I had just rode. It definitely feels more planted in the sweeps than the Himalayan did. Although the Himalayan felt fine, this felt like you could go a lot faster and take those corners a little bit faster without it feeling getting towards twitchy. The Shotgun definitely felt very planted. The fueling was very nice. Throttle response was smooth, and the acceleration, you probably heard back here a minute ago, very lovely. Honestly, even with the stock exhaust, it has a very nice tone to it. I probably would put aftermarket exhausts on the Shotgun, maybe go with like an AEW or something like that. But very pleasant to ride. The handling was probably the best part, because it definitely felt like that sport cruiser feel that, without going to like forward controls, you had mid controls, and you're leaning back, you're leaning forward just a little bit more. It was a very fun bike to ride with the 650 engine, and I think the Shotgun is clearly sort of, whether they intend to or not, I don't think that they intend to, but it definitely, with Harley Davidson getting rid of the 883, I honestly think that the Shotgun 650 is a perfect shoe-in to kind of fill that role for people who might have been looking for a Sportster as they either add to their garage or being their first bike. Let's see, what can I say about it? Well, the suspension felt fine on these roads. There's a few cracks and a couple bumps here, and it definitely soaked up those with me on it. No sweat, didn't feel too stiff, which is kind of a problem I run into sometimes, being with a little bit more lightweight. The brakes felt fine. Honestly, I didn't really have to test the brakes at all during this ride. other than just, you know, doing a little bit of slowing down. Absolutely no more vibration than my Interceptor 650. Felt good, felt smooth, transmission felt nice. Now it did contrast with the Himalayan 450 transmission in that, you know, you feel like you're going back to a little bit more of an old school transmission, but it still felt great. So the shotgun being their retro roadster, one of the cool things about that, I think, is that they also, and I know that they designed this in mind, but getting on the bike and riding it, I could definitely see it. This is a bike they mean for you to do what you want to it. And there's so much you could do with this bike as far as the looks go. You could turn this bike in a whole bunch of different directions. You know, you could retro this bike out a little more, or you could possibly even, you know, make it a little more sport bike-like. Just, it's kind of all up to you. This one is a blank canvas. I particularly like the colorway of the one I rode, this nice white and blue. But there are definitely things I would do to this bike if I were to purchase one. I enjoyed my time on the Shotgun 650. It has my familiar 650 twin engine, but it does have a little bit different personality. Like I said, I think it is a little bit more torquey. It's not trying to be a Harley or a Japanese cruiser. It's like its own thing, but it definitely, I think people looking in that mid-weight, that mid-displacement engine size thing for a cruiser might want to check out the Shotgun 650. Bonus. Unfortunately, we aren't going to get to ride this bike, but we are getting a look at the Classic 350 here at the test ride event in Marnie, Iowa from Royal Enfield. And you can probably see it behind me. We have got the Classic 650. And I think I really like this black and chrome the best. It is honestly very beautiful, and I think that matte black on the frame blends in a little better on this bike than some of the other colorways. You know, it does have some kind of carryover similarities from the Classic 350 in the foot position, the handlebar position. The dash is the same, except that it comes with the tripper. This paint is absolutely beautiful. It's black, but it's sparkly metallic. I forget what they call that. And it is an absolute gorgeous bike. Hopefully I will get to test ride this bike maybe next year. We'll see when these come. I rode was the Bear 650, and I really liked it. It's for where they had me ride on the Himalayan 450 in the lower seat height. The Bear is just 0.2 inches taller in the seat, and I could tell, definitely I could tell, but it was actually very easy with my 29 30-inch inseam to one foot it. Felt very great. You could tell I definitely could tell it was taller than my Interceptor, and you could feel that in the sweeps a little bit. When I rode the Meteor, it felt a little more planted. Not that the Bear didn't, but the Bear, on conversely, felt much easier to take the sweeps. So stay tuned, and I will add a little bit of ride video and some narration over that. All right, so one small correction, or actually just kind of an add-on to what I was saying there in the intro about this Bear 650, was the fact that I was unaware until I finished the ride and had already recorded those closing thoughts on it, that this particular Bear happened to have the touring seat on it, which actually made it a bit taller. So all of my misgivings about being able to ride the Bear being even taller than my Interceptor, and being a tall kind of, and you've heard me talk about my Interceptor. When I'd go sit on Interceptors in the store, I kind of felt like they were top heavy compared to Bonneville's and things like that. Well, I think I'm completely over that particular mentality, because getting on the Bear, now I don't know if they've done something with the balance on it, but it is great. This one, even with the extra tall seat and my short inseam, I had no sweat riding it. The first thing I noticed was kind of how natural the position is. My Interceptor never had the stock bars, so this is by far the most upright position that I've rode on an Interceptor type bike. Now the Bear is based on the Interceptor, but it's taller with different forks. You've got a little bit of a different handlebar, although it's very similar to the stock handlebar on the Interceptor. It's more of the Scrambler-esque type handlebar. And honestly, this bike made absolutely perfect sense as a Scrambler version of an Interceptor 650. It did feel taller, and you felt that weight when you go into the sweeps, but it actually felt kind of similar to the Himalayan 450, in that it still felt planted, but you definitely felt that weight. You could lean that weight over a little bit, and it was very responsive to direction changes, just throwing your hips around. So there were no problems there. Like an Interceptor, it felt like riding an Interceptor in much other ways. The throttle response was crisp, and the bike seemed pretty easy to rev out, just like my Interceptor. Acceleration felt strong and spirited, but it was still smooth and controllable. The gearbox was slick, and the clutch was light, just like my Interceptor, and everything worked together to make this a very fun ride. Very different ride from my personal Interceptor. The height of this bike does give it a bit more of a playful feel, I think, and with some practice, I think I would be perfectly comfortable taking this on some of the dirt roads, and they call them farm roads in here, even though some of them go up some crazy, they become Jeep trails. I think I could honestly ride this bike with no sweat. Let me see, what else can I tell you about it? The stance works well for this bike. The ride quality was nice. It felt sharp and agile through these sweeps, and the suspension setup seemed fine to me. There wasn't anything really on the test ride to truly test how the suspension felt. There was only some small bumps as you came into the next town over, and I never noticed anything, even at very slow speeds when we were kind of pulling around back to park the bikes again. This bike felt very stable, and I had no qualms about maneuvering it around, doing a little tight U-turn to get it back parked, for the next riders. The brakes seemed fine, again, much like the other three bikes. There was no reason to really test out or opportunity to test out the brakes on this particular test ride. I did use them a little bit to slow down, just a little bit here and there, but they felt fine. In fact, I think the back brake felt better than my Interceptor, honestly. So that was kind of a nice little surprise. Otherwise, you know, it had the same sort of little bit of a buzz and character of the twin. I think you can feel it maybe a little bit more in this bike than you could in the Shotgun, but it's so minimal, it's like probably not even worth talking about. This is a bike I think I could see putting on some saddlebags, you know, some soft saddlebags, and maybe kind of a soft trunk bag, and you know, you could definitely pull off some really cool adventures on this particular bike. I love that they came out with the scrambler version of the Interceptor, and I think if that was kind of a bike that you wanted, if you wanted a modern classic scrambler, I don't see any other reason to go with anything but just going straight to buying a Bear 650. I did really like the speedometer, the clock on this bike a little bit more than the Bear. The Shotgun. It's much clearer. It's kind of like, it's very similar to the Himalayan TFT screen. You can see that real clear. You can see that right now I'm in 6th gear doing 49, 50 miles an hour. And you have your rev counter, your tachometer there on the outside of the clock. Now, I believe I never did really switch this around, as far as I do think there's some other screens that you can pull up, but it's very easy to read. All the information you could probably want right there on that one screen. I do love the fact that both on the Shotgun and this Bear 650, that they have gone to the controls very similar to what they came out with on the Classic 350. I think those initially came out on the Hunter and the Classic 350, and they've kind of moved these style controls. I'm talking about the switchgear with the dials on top, and it's just a very intuitive, very well made switchgear, in that, like, they're so easy to use and so intuitive compared to a lot of other switchgear, and they honestly look better. Let's see, what else can I tell you? Well, out of the Himalayan 450, the Shotgun, and the Bear, I think that the Bear is the one that put the biggest grin on my face. It's a sporty scrambler that I think I could really see myself on, although, you know, it would be a tiny bit redundant with my Interceptor. This would be a great bike for anybody wanting to get into that 650 platform, or has another 650 platform, but they want the scrambler version. I think you would really enjoy this bike. Each of these bikes have their own personality. You know, the Himalayan 450, definitely, that's your go anywhere bike. So, like, one other thing I want to throw out there is, if you haven't checked out the Fuzzy Bikers, go to Forgotten Motorcycles and check out his, I think it's a 45,000 mile review. In 11 months, actually just at a year, the Fuzzy Biker has put on over 45,000 miles on his Himalayan 450 and been to 49 states. That's all of the states that are, you know, plus Canada. He hasn't had the bike to Hawaii, but he has put that bike through its paces. Now, most of that's been on road, but he's done BDR work. You know, he's been on some very rough roads, going like through the Yukon and Alaska. And that is a super durable bike. If you have the leg length for it, which I think pretty much just anybody but all of the shortest people can, that's your bike to do anything with. I would say the Shotgun and the Bear would be more of your play bikes. The Shotgun being the thing you want to customize and kind of show off. The Bear is a little bit more similar to the Himalayan 450 with just a little bit of extra engine power. It is air cooled, but it does have just a little bit more engine power and might be better for like on the road more maybe. But it definitely has some capability off-road. I would love to test the Bear 650 on like some forest roads, things like that. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this little bit of test ride videos. These were 3 bikes from Royal Enfield that I never get to ride before, and definitely had the opportunity, wanted to ride these specific 3, especially the Bear 650 and the Himalayan 450, because I was a little intimidated initially about their height. The Bear 650 is definitely approachable for me. There's something about how it balances and everything, the weight and everything, seemed a little easier to ride than that more fully loaded version of the 450, the Himalayan, that I tried to ride to lunch. I think that's a hurdle I could get over, but I just need more time and a little bit of practice. Maybe figuring out like how to mount that motorcycle and get it up off the side stand with not a whole lot of leverage left in my leg. So thanks for joining me again on this particular journey, and let me know your thoughts. Which one of these 3 do you think you would be wanting to add to your garage? Or if you have them, any of these 3, give me your thoughts on how I presented them. Has your experience been the same? Appreciate it. Please leave a like, subscribe, and I will see you next time.